17.
Dude, I gotta be honest. I miss my beard. I miss it. I shaved it, and now I realize I have to shave every day. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to shave properly. Also, I don't have good razors. Somebody gave me a pack of razors, and I think they're woman razors, because they have one little blade. I'm trying not to curse in the first minute of the video. I heard that's what you're so. If you curse after the first minute, apparently your video's okay. Anyway, every morning I get up to shave, and I'm like, all right, Brandon, put the cream on or whatever, and then just gentle as a river, just down, down. And I do it, and it just blood. There's blood, and I'm like, I don't know how to shave. So I have blood, or what do they call it? Razor stumps? I don't know what they're called. I genuinely miss my beard. Also, my mom's side of the family, they have really fat faces, and I'm afraid the more I age, I'll get one of their fat faces, and I think I might seriously, like, I'm not even joking, I think I might borderline have anorexia, because back when I was taking kratom in 2017, everybody knows when you take kratom, you just don't eat because it messes with it, and I was so thin, and my face was thin, and I would look in the mirror, and I'd be like, yeah, you look good, you look good. And then I would start eating a lot of, like, breakfast burritos, and I'd get fat, and people would say, no, you look healthy. And I'd be like, no, I don't like it. My face looks fat. In 2021, I filmed a documentary, and I looked at my face, the way my face looked, when I recorded it on an iPad camera, and I had a fat face, and I just stopped eating after that. Anyway, this has nothing to do with the story. Let's get into it. So this is going to be part 4 of the never-ending story, how I became an addict. It's been a while since I filmed part 3. I can't remember where I ended up. Oh, okay. So I ended off with, I was in a tumultuous, toxic relationship, which I'm overblowing, by the way. I keep pointing out the negatives of this girl and not the positives and saying we fought all... Yeah, we did fight all the time, but here's the thing. Everybody I've ever known who's been in a passionate relationship, who fight a lot, are truly in love. Because I've met people who are, like, dating some girl, dating some guy for a year, and you ask them, you're like, so what's gonna happen? Are you gonna get married? And they're like, yeah, I mean, I like him. And it's like, what? That sounds so devoid of love. So there were very good characteristics of this girl. 1, she was a badass. 2, she was beautiful. 3, she was just like me, a lost addict. So I think I was 17 in the last part of the story. Now I'm 18, and unfortunately, this girl was sort of dating me and her ex at the same time. And I know you're probably wondering, did it get better? Did it get better? No, it got worse. It turned into she was basically living there more than she was living with old young me. Young, handsome me at 18. Nah. But the housing crash happened in 2008, and I graduated in 2009. So at this part of the story, I think I had graduated. I was working at a nursing home, was making okay money, and I didn't really know what to do with my life, and I had 2 best friends, one of which I've talked about on this story series a lot. His name was Mike. Mike was like a tall, skinny Jewish kid. He was kind of crazy, and he was kind of getting into psychedelics really bad at this point in the story. And as you all know, and I think I've demonstrated it in the past videos, I hate psychedelics. I hate tripping. I hate it. I hate it. To me, tripping is just, hey, let's explore the dark skeletal cleaning out the closet parts of your mind.
Did you try the chicken, buddy?
That you you really don't want, like, memories from childhood that I don't want to remember, really. So I hate tripping. He loved tripping. And also, he was, Mike, he was always trying to be the crazy guy. He was always trying to, like, he would get drunk in school. And I think he watched that Doors movie, the Jim Morrison movie, because he would always get drunk and I would say, "Oh, Mike is Jim Morrisoning, Jim Morrisoning." I don't know. But he would act like Jim Morrison. He would like walk into the room with a bottle of alcohol and just fall all over the place. I think because he saw that Doors movie. And he was the one I got arrested with in part one, I think, of the series. But you got to remember, Mike was pretty much broke. He lived with his mom, he didn't have that much money, and he didn't grow up with a father. But he eventually got into contact with his father, who lived in Hagerstown, Pennsylvania, which is weird because that's like, I think the book Catcher in the Rye mentions that part of I thought it was like fictional part of Pennsylvania. So he starts having phone conversations with his father every night. And my friend Mike was ecstatic. He was so happy that he was finally had a relationship with his father. And then he started meeting up with him, and he loved the guy, and he was finally at peace and happy, because it's tough to grow up without a father. I think everybody should grow up with a father. But one day, he came into school, and he looked really distraught. And I was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, "Brandon," he was like, "My dad fell asleep last night in his chair," kind of like this one, "smoking a cigarette." I said, "Oh man, okay, what happened?" He said he fell asleep and it caught on he caught on fire. He burned to death. And my friend Mike was like 17. And that's not where the story ends. He goes, "Yeah, the police called and I had to go to the hospital to identify him." And I said, "Oh, that's a nightmare. How could you do that to a 17-year-old?" They basically just took this innocent 17-year-old and was like, "Hey, come identify your father at the hospital." They just lured him into the hospital and were like, Is that him? Ew, ew. Is that him? Ew." And I'm sure his dad was burnt up and had pus on his face. And my friend's like, "Oh, yes, I guess that's him. I don't know." How could you do that to a child? I think it mentally scarred him for life. And I don't think he ever got over that trauma. Um, yeah. So that may have been his cause for going down the wrong road, getting really into psychedelics. I don't think he ever got over that. He was different from that day onward. So I know this doesn't really like link up to my story, but I'm trying to paint a picture of what my two best friends were like before I move forward with the story. Now that's Mike, tall, skinny Jewish, loves psychedelics. Now my friend Wayne was super handsome dude. I remember all the girls kind of flocked to him. But here's the thing about good-looking people, is they're often douchebags. When you're good-looking, you don't have to have a personality. Are you kidding me? And I'm not saying he didn't have a personality. He did have one, but it was kind of psychopathic. He reminded me of Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunny. And let me just tell a quick story to highlight his psychopathy. Years later, well, this is interesting because my two best friends became trust fund kids. Mike, when his father died, he got like hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, by the way, don't ever give a 17-year-old that much money. They're going to blow through it on stupid stuff like drugs and fleshlights. But my friend Wayne, his grandma died and he got hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I went and lived with him. This is years later. I'm just trying to highlight what these two people were like to paint a picture. And I remember, and this is an example of how good of a friend I was, is both of my friends that became trust fund kids were blowing through their money irresponsibly. And I was always the one to be like, "Hey, dude, why don't you like invest this money? Like, don't spend it, save it. Like, don't spend it." So years later, my friend Wayne, his grandma died. So I moved in with him and his girlfriend. This was like 2013, so I'm really fast forwarding. But I got to his house. He lived in his grandma's house. He had like a four-wheeler and he bought a big Jeep because douchebags buy Jeeps. So one day he was like, "Hey, Brandon, let's go to Dick's Sporting Goods and let's buy a bunch of airsoft guns." And I'm like, "All right, I guess so." So we went there and we bought like $1,500 worth of like Tommy gun, high top grade airsoft guns. And we got back to the house and we suited up. He got like a chest plate on. All I had to protect myself was he had like a Halloween Hulk, like the Green Hulk outfit with like buff pecs. So I wore that to protect myself. Nothing else. I didn't have a face mask, nothing. So we're like treading through his backyard at night with like these Tommy gun high powered airsoft guns. I don't want to do it. And my friend Wayne is like an expert at gun combat sport. And I'd be hiding behind a bush and I would peek out of the bush and all of a sudden it would be like getting hit in the throat by like 15 airsoft pellets at once. It hurts. It hurt. I would just go, fuck, fuck it, fuck it.
Fucking thing sucks!
And I'd want to quit because it hurt. It hurt a lot. And he thought it was funny. He was a sadistic bastard. And eventually he was like, all right, Brandon, I'll stop putting you through tremendous amounts of pain. How about this? How about we crawl through my suburban neighborhood dressed in all black and shoot at houses with airsoft guns? And I'm young and stupid, so I'm like, all right. But a part of me was like, are you sure that's a good idea? Like, we live in like a post-Columbine era. Is it smart to be like dressed in black, army crawling through a suburban neighborhood, like with machine guns? Anyways, we did it. And I remember we got to this house and we're army crawling and we're shooting at windows. You pull the trigger and it would shoot like 5. And he hit a window and we were watching this couple fighting. We could see them, but they couldn't see us. And I remember the boyfriend opened his sliding glass door. It's like 11 at night. And he goes, hello? And we were just sitting there like holding our breath like, ugh. And then eventually I was like, all right, dude, this feels like illegal. Let's stop doing this. And we got home. And Wayne was like, hey, Brandon, I have an idea. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And he went, that house we shot at, he said, I know that girl. And this is what I'm going to do. And I'm like, why is there always like a plot with you psychopath? And he's like, I'm going to knock on her door tomorrow because her boyfriend isn't home. I'm like, how do you know that? And he's like, when she opens the door, and I'm going to go, hey, God told me that you're having fights with your boyfriend. The voice in my head told me to knock at your door. And he was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to steal her away from her boyfriend. And I immediately went, that is the most psychopathic, Patrick Bateman-esque American Psycho shit I've ever heard. You are a psychopath.
Then I apply an herb mint facial mask, which I leave on for 10 minutes while I prepare the rest of my routine.
I don't know if he went through with it, but I'm just painting this picture so you know who Mike and Wayne are and what they're like. So at this point in the story, I'm jealous of my girlfriend, and I really want to cast vengeance on her. I want to get back at her. So my friend Wayne goes, hey, why don't you and Mike move into an apartment? And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. One, I'm already like delving into the world of addiction. Maybe getting away from my parents can help me drink all day and do drugs all day. And no, I'm the only responsible person for myself. So I said that's a great idea. Now, mind you, the economy is really bad. And this is how you could tell it was getting bad. prior to the housing market crash, you would occasionally see a homeless guy jerking off in the middle of an intersection. But once the economy crashed, you would see about 3 a day. Nowadays, you see homeless guys with signs that say, hey, I'm a veteran. They're lying, of course. Can I get some money? But back then, every time you were in traffic, instead of a homeless guy with a sign, you would see a homeless guy jerking off. You'd see him there on the street, and he would just be going like this. And you'd have to go, oh, God, please turn green light. Okay, then you would drive away. You knew that homeless guy was jerking off behind you. So times were bad. So we immediately go apartment hunting, and everywhere we went, they needed a credit score and to see our criminal record. Mind you, me and Mike had got arrested together. We had a criminal record. So we eventually found like this 40-year-old woman named Lisa. She was like a real estate lady. And she showed us this apartment in like some dingy building filled with felons. And she was like, hey, I don't care about your credit. I don't care about your criminal record. If you give me $900 a month, you can stay here. And it was a big apartment. And we were like, okay, cool. But a part of me was like, I wonder what kind of people are living here. And when we walked in to look at the apartment, we immediately saw this lady, and her skin was covered in red rashes. She was this tiny little rashy lady with skimpy hair, and she was the creepiest woman I'd ever seen. Like, as soon as we walked up the stairs, we saw her, and she saw us, and she was like, and she just sort of like backed away. And we were like, oh, that's creepy. And we moved in immediately. And mind you, the show It's Always Sunny was getting really popular right around this time. And we really loved that show. So we knew people that could buy beer for us. Like my brother-in-law, sweet guy, love him to death. He would buy me like 5 30-packs of Keystone because I had money to spare. And we would just immediately start drinking beers just all day. Maybe not Mike and Wayne, but me, I drank all day. And I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, well, you're 18. Isn't it normal for teenagers to drink? Yes. But with me, it was all or nothing. If I found something that made me happy, I would beat it into the ground. And I would do it. If my friends took 2 Adderall, I would take 5 Adderall. So me, Mike, and Wayne were the 3 amigos. There's young me, freshly shaven. Wayne, handsome dude. He looked like the wolf kid from Twilight? The Twilight movie? And Mike was a tall, skinny Jewish kid that loved acid. And we'll get more into that later. So as soon as we moved in, me and Wayne bonded over drinking a lot. He drank just as much as me. Mike didn't drink as much. He was more into taking a lot of acid, and he was going consistently crazier, which we'll get to later. I'm trying to hook you. But let me just give you an example of the dumb stuff we were doing at this age while drunk. So it was starting to become winter, and we lived in this town that was just one street. But there were like 3 cops in this town for some reason. One night, me and Wayne got really drunk, and he was teaching me. We had these fake pistol airsoft guns, or BB guns, and we were training each other to disarm each other. Like, I know how to if somebody puts a pistol in my face, I know how to disarm it, I think. I still remember. But we got this brilliant idea to just get really drunk and just go wreck the entire town. So me and Wayne, we put on our winter coats. We're drunk. I think we even put beers in our pockets. And we were walking down the street, and we found a baseball bat. So we're like, cool, that's a weapon now that we're going to wield. And we grabbed this baseball bat, and we just start smashing car windows out. And I remember my friend Wayne found a bike with a chain attached to it, and he was strong, so he just ripped the bike off, and it had those little peg things that you can do wheelies on in the back, like they're big silver pegs. And he picked up the bike, he lifted it over his head, and he just threw it into a truck's windshield, and it just smashed all over the place. I think we set a few trash cans on fire, and we were just laughing the whole time. Just pure destruction. And when we got back to the apartment, we saw this kid that just sort of hung out there. And he said, "Hey, man, the cops are looking for, like, two people that are destroying the town." And we said, "Well, what did you tell him?" And he goes, "Oh, I told him it was this kid named Terry who used to bully me in school." And we were like, "Thanks, man, cool." So the cops probably woke this Terry kid up and were like, "Did you destroy the town?" And he was probably like, "What?" So that's just an example of the kind of dumb stuff you do when you're young. But mind you, Taylor is still living in Virginia with her ex. So I made it my mission to bang as many girls as I possibly could. And boy, did I. And before it sounds like I'm bragging, I just gotta say this. My luck with women has completely depleted. It dried out. And by that, I mean I have gone years without getting laid. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm a loner, and the only time I'm around girls is when I work with them. And one of my philosophies in life is to just be myself. And I don't think being myself is necessarily attracting any women out there, let's be real. But in 2021, it had been years since I got laid, and I was so desperate that I went to a Halloween party. This was last year, and one of my sister's friends was there. And I liked her when she was younger, but she got, well, a little heavy. And we were talking, and I was like, you know what? I'm sick of being this shy, anxious guy. I'm going to act all confident. I think I was on Phenibut too, and I was drinking. And as we were talking, I just looked at her, and I kind of went, I was bored of whatever she was saying. And I went, "You know what we're going to do, right?" And she went, "Yeah." So we plotted. She was like, "I'll take you to my apartment." So she drove me to her apartment. I blacked out in the car, drunk, and then performed the worst sex a man ever could. I'm pretty sure I was half limp. You know, because when you think you're gonna bang a girl, you're used to porn. You're used to like a big old dick in the it's just slamming, going the side. But for me, I remember she was banging me, and it was just like, just barely raising. So I did that. I cleared years of. I'm only telling you this so it doesn't sound like I'm bragging, but I had a good run when I was like 18. I was getting drunk all the time, and I was banging every girl I could. We would have parties at the house, and girls would be there, and of course, we would bang. I banged a bunch of girls this winter. I banged a lot of girls, and of course, Taylor found out about it, and she was super jealous. But I guess she didn't see the hypocrisy in the fact that she was dating two people at the same time. And I'm not trying to make her sound like a horrible person. I completely understand where she was coming from. I forgave her. I didn't care. I loved her to death. And I just wanted her to come back to me. And we'll get to that later. So, and as inevitably predicted, Taylor eventually caught wind of this and started coming to the apartment to hang out. Now, I hadn't seen her in a month or so. So, I pretty much was taking a lot of Klonopin, Vyvanse, drinking all the time, and every time she would come over, there would be huge parties going on downstairs. So I remember one night she came over, and as soon as she walked in the room, and I know I saw this in a movie. I think I saw it from Trainspotting. I had a Klonopin, and I put it in my mouth, and I went up to her, and I started making out with her, but I transferred the Klonopin to her mouth. And she was like, "Oh, cool. Like, I guess I'm on Klonopin now. Thanks." But she was happy. She liked Klonopin. This wasn't like a date rape attempt or anything. She had taken it before. I thought it was cool. Oh, I'm gonna do this. And I remember she said to me, she was like, "You're kind of crazy now. I kind of like this crazy Brandon." And mind you, prior to this, you know, we were like doing it all the time, not wearing condoms, and I was just like not being precautious at all. But I was convinced that I had impotency. Maybe it was because I smoked weed all the time, but she just never seemed to get pregnant. And I remember I like banged her aggressively, like doggy style. I know this is like too kind of gritty and too much information, but she was like, I don't know. She was like, I don't know. She was like, I like this new crazy version of you, like this tough guy bangs doggy style aggressively. But she eventually moved back in with me because of that. And I think my friend Wayne was pissed because he was like, I guess he saw her as like a Yoko Ono. He's like, dude, one, she's like a drug addict. And I'm like, dude, I am a drug addict. And he was like, she's going to break up this whole friendship, blah, blah, blah. Which I think she eventually did. But she moved back in. And I was super happy. And I think she left her old boyfriend JP behind. I think she just broke up with him. So this kind of created a rift between me, Mike, and Wayne. And this is when, I think it was like a day after Taylor moved in, somebody had given me a Tylenol 3. And if you don't know what a Tylenol 3 is, it is the weakest opiate. It's basically 90% Tylenol, 10% codeine, which is so weak. I guarantee you if I took one of them today, I'd feel nothing. But at the time, I had no opiate tolerance. So I remember I was hungover. Somebody gave me and Taylor a Tylenol 3, and I went into work. And I was like, boom, knocking out, handing trays to old dementia people and just talking fast. And I remember that was my first experience with the warm, motivating, gentle touch of opiates. And I remember this is Taylor had ordered kratom. I didn't know what kratom was. We got it in the mail, and I was suspicious that it would even work. And I remember we both didn't know how to take it, so we just went to our dirty sink with a coffee mug, filled it with water, and just dumped a bunch of it in the water. And I remember mixing it up, and it wouldn't mix. It was like real clumpy. And Taylor couldn't drink it down because it was disgusting. But me, I was like chugging it down. And I think since it was winter, I went to my job. And if you work in healthcare, you can't afford to not make it to work because of a snowstorm. So I got snowed in at my job with all my coworkers. I was happy as I was having the time of my life. And I was just drinking powder, just mixed water with kratom, just. And I'll never forget, there was this Deer Tick song called Friday the 13th.
Well, come on, baby, it's 4:45. I've been living on the couch and losing my mind. I haven't got the touch in a long, long.
And the whole time at work, I'm snowed in for 3 days. I'm drinking this kratom. And I could hear the song in my head. Come on, baby, it's 4:45. Been living on the couch, been losing my mind. Haven't gotten the touch in a long, long time. Since Friday the 13th, part 9, I'm going to hell. And that was the greatest 3 days of my life. And I really think that Tylenol 3 and kratom was my first introduction to opiates. And Taylor, she couldn't partake because she couldn't swallow it. But I could. And I hope this highlights that at this time, I would put any discomfort and I would just throw it out the window and just suffer the pain just to feel good. Alright, so real quick, I'm stopping the story to go to the store to get a Red Bull. And I'm driving through my neighborhood. And by the way, all my neighbors hate me. because years ago I would be on Xanax and I would speed through the neighborhood, maybe going like 5 miles over than I should be, and they would all yell, "Hey!" And one time I got out of the car and I was like, "Come on, bitch!" Like, I was trying to fight this guy. And of course I wouldn't have done that if I was sober. But like, just now I'm driving through my neighborhood and this lady is walking her stupid fucking, I don't even know, wiener dog. And she looks at me and goes, "Ah." And then she kneels down and grabs her dog and starts calming it down. And I'm like, what do you think I'm gonna do, lady? Run over your stupid dog? You know? But here's the thing, is I really wish I could apologize to my neighbors for screaming at them when I was on Xanax years ago, because now I can't jog in my own neighborhood. I have to jog on a dangerous street near my house, like where people notoriously are getting hit. Oh look, road work. Is this guy gonna yell at me? Am I speeding? Nah, he's nice. Anyway, I'll get back to the story when I get back. Alright, I'm back from the store. So where was I at the story? Okay, let's move on. So Taylor had moved back in with me, but mind you, I'd banged a bunch of girls in a rapid succession while she was with her ex-boyfriend. And for some reason, she was a really jealous person. I have never been a jealous person. Even when I was with Taylor, she was way out of my league. I always had to stave off fighting other dudes because they would look at us and be like, "Why are you with him?" And I had a philosophy. If somebody started messing with me or clowning me or trying to like hit on Taylor in front of me, this has always been my philosophy. And I know I'm a small dude, but when I was young, my dad, well, I would get into a lot of fights at school because I called it my young lion phase. And I didn't coin that. This other YouTuber I watch coined that term. And I was always getting into fights because I liked the glory of winning. And I also didn't mind, like, the embarrassment of losing. So here's 3 things to know if you want to win a lot of fights. Number 1, you have to fight no matter what. Treat it like it's prison. You gotta fight to stay alive. 2, don't be embarrassed if you lose the fight. You gotta fight either way. And 3, most of the people I've ever fought, they get really nervous before the fight. And you can tell their voice starts shaking. Because it's super embarrassing to lose a fight. But I don't know, I might have like the Evel Knievel gene. Because whenever somebody would come up and try to clown me in front of Taylor, I would look at him like, "Hey, it's go time." And I had this thing. And plus, when I would get into fights at school, I'd come home and I'd tell my dad. And he'd be like, "All right, let's go hit the heavy bag." So he taught me how to fight. I semi-know how to fight. So I would go up, I'd walk up to him and say, "All right, we're going to fight. I'm going to count down from 3. And they'd be like, bigger than me, but they'd be like, "Why is this young, small kid so confident?" I'd put my hands up. And I would just do one quick left jab. And when you jab, you're not supposed to, like, extend your body. A jab is supposed to just be, like... So I'd daze them with a jab, and they'd... Ooh. And then I'd hit them with another jab. Boom! And then I'd go in for the right hook. Boom! And then I'd come up with a left. Boom! And I would always fight these people. But I lost a lot of fights as well. I may have lost... I think I won more than I lost. But, like, yeah, people would try to steal Taylor away. But I think they sensed that, like, I wasn't the jealous type. If we were at a party and I was with Taylor and some guy started hitting on her, I'd be like, "You know what? She loves me. You're not going to break us up. Like, I don't care how good looking or charming you are. So do what you want, Taylor." But she was the opposite. She was jealous. Which, I mean, I guess that's normal. But I had spent this whole winter banging everybody, and she was really mad that I banged her friend, who was also my friend, Mike's girlfriend, who was a black girl. No, she wasn't mad that it was a black girl. It had nothing to do with... I always just... To tell stories, I'll say, "Oh, it's the black girl," so you can picture it in your mind. But my friend Mike was constantly cheating on his girlfriend. And I've told stories about her. She was in the story about the house that got robbed. You should go watch that video. But me and her, one night, we like banged. And I remember my friend Mike opened the door and we were like sleeping in the bed together. And I feel really guilty about that to this day. But he was cheating on her. And Taylor found out about this. And they remained friends, which made it really a point of contention. So I'll just give you an example of how Taylor's jealousy worked. We would be driving in the car. I'd be driving. And a Led Zeppelin song would come on. Like, hey, hey, what can I do? Or something. And she would just look at me and go, so what, you fucked her? And I'd be like, what? And she'd be like, you fucked her, didn't you? She doesn't have a Bronx accent. But in her mind, she thought I was subliminally giving her a message through a Led Zeppelin song that I banged some girl. But we were constantly fighting, and we would fight for fun, but we would fight in fights. And let me just tell you this, honesty is my best policy. During this period and years later, Taylor probably punched me in the face 8 or 9 times until, and a lot of people aren't going to like this, but honesty is the best policy, I started hitting back. And there were times where we would physically fight each other and we would just start banging each other on the floor. That's how passionate our relationship was. But also, there was this thing we did at parties. We would go to a party and we would go in the living room and everybody would gather around us like Fight Club. And we would box and we would punch the shit out of each other. We would put on like a cock spar record and we would just boom. She'd be punching me in the chest and we wouldn't hit each other in the face. And everybody would be cheering us on and we'd be beating the crap out of each other. And I remember some guys would kind of look at me like, is this okay? Like, this guy is technically hitting a girl. But here's the thing. Taylor was like a badass punk anarchist, so she could handle her stuff. And I could tell these guys would be like, maybe I should intervene and be the big macho guy. But, and the next day, we would have bruises covered on our body, and we loved it because we were young punk anarchist teenagers. And I have a picture of us fighting. It's not in good quality, but here it is. So the contention started boiling and boiling, and me and Taylor would get into these fights where she would be threatening to kill herself all the time. And when I met her, she had cuts all over her arms and legs and everything. And prior to that, I had not been into cutting or anything, but I think that she kind of spread her suicidal ideation onto me, because if you look at my left arm, it's just filled with slashes. And that's not because I was a cutter, but sometimes during these fights, I would pick up a razor and I'd go,
Times are getting hard, boy.
and I'd slip my wrists open. And there was one time during this winter where she cut herself with a knife. Or no, it was a razor. But she cut herself on her side so deep that a gash just this thick just opened up. And it was during a snowstorm, so we couldn't take her to the hospital. So we were freaked out about it getting infected. But on this particular night, she just would not stop nudging me like, you banged this girl and that girl. And in my head, I'm like, well, you were with your boyfriend. You left me. I was single. I've never cheated on you. And here's the thing. I have never cheated on anybody. I've never done it. And she always thought when I went to work, because I worked with all these young hot nurses, that I was banging them. And I was like, I wish I could carry a GoPro around. GoPro wasn't invented yet. But I'm like, what type of stud do you think I am? Like, you don't know how I interact with these nurses at work. I'm socially awkward and anxious. I'm not the stud you think I am. That whole night, she was threatening to kill herself, telling me I was cheating. She would not stop cutting herself and threatening suicide. At one point, she opened up the window and threatened to jump out. But one night, not too long after this, we had a big party. And we found out that some drug dealer had gotten arrested. So we went into his apartment. It was me, Taylor, Alex, Mike, Wayne, a bunch of other kids. And we put on these punk records, and we were all dancing. There was this kid named Jarrett. And trust me when I say it, this kid Jarrett's fighting record was like 20-0. But I wasn't afraid of losing a fight, but his demeanor was really off-putting and aggressive. So I'm there with Taylor, we're drunk, everybody's partying. And the next thing you know, this kid Jarrett walks up to me, and he's been drinking as well. And he points at Taylor, he goes, "Hey, take care of her." And I was like, "What?" And he went, promise me you'll take care of her." He's mad dogging me, looking at me really aggressively. And I didn't want to say it like that. I would have cucked myself out immediately if okay, I'll take care of her. Yeah. And I just said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "She's a special girl. Take care of her." And it's pretty soon we're like mad dogging each other, like, "What's it gonna be then, eh?" And I remember I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna fight this kid and I'm gonna lose. And I'm gonna lose in front of Taylor." And I'm not gonna say, "Yeah, okay, I'll take care of her." And he goes, "No, no, 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 no." He goes, "You're not gonna leave until you tell me you're gonna take care of her." And I said, "Fuck you. I'm not telling you shit." And I kept saying, "I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Yeah, I will take care of her, but not because you're telling me to, because nobody tells me what to do." I'm getting mad just thinking about this. And then he left the room, and I remember that night the kids in the apartment were partying so hard. Think about this. It's like 16-year-olds, just a bunch of lost souls partying, drinking, doing Molly, Adderall, snorting stuff. We let anybody into the apartment. And I'm sitting there like, ooh, this guy's trying to punk me out in front of Taylor, and nobody punks me out in front of Taylor. I punk people out in front of Taylor, but nobody punks me out in front of anybody. And I remember all the kids that night that were partying were being really loud, and the cops were constantly coming to our door because of noise complaints. I remember I picked up a wine bottle, and I walked over to the kitchen sink, and I start going, "Frink, frink, frink," and I'm trying to smash this big Zinfandel wine bottle. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going, "Frink, frink," and it just won't smash. And I think right at that moment, a cop came to the door because of a noise complaint. And then he heard this. Finally, the wine bottle smashed. And all of a sudden, I don't know. Maybe I saw red, but I knew Jarrett was upstairs. And I'm like, I had this wine bottle. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going up there. And he's going to see it's going to go down. And I'm going up the stairs, and then I feel an elbow on my shoulder. I'm like, what? And I hear like from a cop's walkie-talkie. And I was like, what is this? I thought it was it was one of my friends like grabbing me. And finally, this big buff cop kind of yanked me, and he went, "What are you doing with that wine bottle?" And I was like blindsided. I had no idea. A cop just entered my house. I guess he legally could because he heard a wine bottle smash. And this is how I got away with it. I said, we're I didn't know what to say. So I said, "We're making a movie." And I said, there's a scene where a guy gets angry with a wine bottle, and I'm practicing my role. And he didn't believe me. He said, no. Who were you? You were going to go attack somebody with a wine bottle. And all of a sudden, Wayne and Mike come down and a couple other people. And the cop said, "What's he doing with the wine bottle?" He said he's making a movie. And my friend said, yeah, we're making a movie. Yeah, there's a scene with the wine bottle. And the cop let me go. And he's, one, how did he have the right to enter my apartment? Two, he told me, he was like, I'm glad. Are you being, he didn't believe me, but what was he going to do? He was like, had your friend not stood up for you, he said, I would have given you a attempted murder charge. And I don't know what happened with the Jarrett kid. I think he left because we had a big apartment and some people would leave through the top floor. There was like a door that left to the exit of the building. All right, so now that I got that out of the way, I hope I've highlighted sort of where my young dumb mind was at this point. At this point, I don't have a habit on anything. And by habit, I mean I don't have to like take anything every day or else I can't function. But I'm drinking a lot. I'm doing Klonopin, Ambien. By the way, somebody left a comment for me to tell Ambien stories. I have so many Ambien stories. I was drinking weed, started doing kratom. Tylenol 3 got introduced, but I only did that once, and I didn't think I was going to go back to harder opiates. And also, I'm trying to highlight the contention that me and Taylor had, but I keep painting it as like a toxic relationship. We really, truly loved each other, and we had way more good memories than bad memories. So I'm not trying to paint her in a bad light, like she was a cheater. She was young, and she left her boyfriend who manipulated her emotionally. So I have no hard feelings for her for dating two dudes at the same time. But meanwhile, my friend Mike was really going crazy with taking acid and triple C's every day. And if you don't know, triple C's, if you took a bunch of those, they were stronger than acid. So he started kind of losing his mind. And me and Mike and Taylor, or no, me and Wayne and Taylor, we started noticing that every time Mike would come up to us, he had like a shit smell to him. And we were like, are you like shitting and not wiping, or are you just shitting yourself? Just like, whatever, I'll just shit. I'm not going to make it to the bathroom. And he always had these bugged out eyes. And he started to really get into that new age spiritualism stuff and The Secret. And I remember he said something really profound. One time he was tripping and he said, Brandon, we're entering the second age of Aquarius. And I was like, what? And he went, we're entering it. He said, you know how the 60s was like summer of love? Everybody was tripping and they were on a higher plane. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, we're going to enter that again soon, but it's not going to be love. It's going to be hate. He said there's going to be widespread protests, but it's going to be more hateful and vengeful. And I'm like, dude, he predicted 2020 hashtag summer of love. 2020 summer of love. He predicted that. He prophesized it. So he was always kind of going on about this like new age jargon. And he started going really crazy. And I remember one night he started crying. And we were like, Mike, what is wrong with you? And he literally broke down. He said, after my dad died, I've been trying to fill the hole with psychedelics. And he started crying and he said, I should have never taken LSD. Because let's face it, LSD can make you kind of crazy. For me, LSD ruined weed for me. After I started tripping, I couldn't enjoy weed. Because every time I would smoke, I'd have negative thoughts. I didn't even like tripping in the first place. Like, if there's an old Beatles biography where Paul McCartney said, LSD could change your mind forever, could change your personality. Paul McCartney was afraid of that. John Lennon, on the other hand, liked it. So John Lennon and my friend Mike did the same thing. They tripped all day for like a whole summer and winter. So we were like, we didn't know what to do with Mike because he was wandering off. He always had big pupils. And I remember one night we had an intervention and I didn't know how to fix it. And Taylor was just telling him, like, hey, maybe stop taking the acid. And Wayne was being harsh on him. Wayne was like, Mike, you got to face the facts. You know, just stop doing drugs. Because Wayne, he only drank, basically. But he was prescribed Vyvanse, and he was always giving me those. And I told him, I said, Mike, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you to see a therapist, and we're going to get you on an antidepressant. Because I didn't know. I didn't know what to say or do. And eventually he just didn't do that, and he kept getting worse. So I told him, hey, Mike, why don't you just start drinking a lot like me? And he went, okay. And I was buying I was getting my brother-in-law to buy 30 packs of Keystone. And Mike started drinking a lot. And honestly, it kind of made him better. Like, he wasn't like a wild drunk. But one night, I got my older brother-in-law to buy Everclear. And if you've ever taken Everclear, it's basically like moonshine, I think. It's like 100% alcohol. Once you take one sip of Everclear, it kills you. You're like, "Ah!" And it gets you really drunk. And Mike drank half the bottle of Everclear. And I remember while he was drinking, he was chugging it. And I remember going, Mike, maybe slow down a little. Because I was just taking little baby sips. And he got so drunk that he started a fight with Wayne. Mind you, Wayne is also really good at fighting. Like, Wayne took boxing classes. And quick side note, I know I shouldn't take these side notes as much, but years later when I lived with Wayne, his Asian girlfriend, I kept making her laugh. And Wayne wasn't that funny, but he was handsome. But I'm funny. So he got jealous. And one night, Wayne got me drunk in front of Victoria, his Asian girlfriend. And he said, Brandon, let's box. Let's put on the boxing gloves and box. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And Wayne proceeded to pummel me in front of his girlfriend because he was jealous that I made her laugh. So that's Wayne. He's a good boxer. Well, Mike picked a fight with Wayne. And Wayne was like, F off, Mike. Like, I don't want to fight you. But all of a sudden, Mike walks up to Wayne, boom, and sucker punches him with this skinny, Jewish, weak arm. And I remember Wayne grabbed him by his hair, and he punched him in the face. And Wayne was always bragging, if you can grab somebody by their hair and punch them, their face, into the punch, he said their head doesn't have any snapback. So it's like a lot more brutal. Boosh! Boosh! And he was about to punch Mike this way. And Mike went, no, stop. I surrender. And I remember Mike walked up to the mirror and he had a busted lip. And he started crying. And he was like, oh no, is this permanent? Is my lip always going to look like this? But Mike continued drinking this Everclear. And the next thing you know, we hear this weird sound of thumping downstairs. And like, we're like, what's going on? And Taylor's there and Wayne is there. So we had this big hallway, second floor, because we had a two-story apartment for $900 a month. It was pretty good. We started going down the rail on the second stairs, and there was blood all over the walls, like fresh blood. And we got downstairs, and there was puddles of blood smeared all over the walls. And Mike had cut his wrist open and was smearing blood all over the walls. So we called 911, and he got locked up in the farm. The farm was keyword for the psych ward, the hospital. If you attempt to delete yourself, you get put in the psych ward for a week, which is pretty sweet. I've done it like 20 times. I love going to the psych ward. For me, it's like a vacation. And then Mike went to the hospital for a week. Meanwhile, me and Taylor and Wayne, we just hung out together. And when Mike got out, he was like better. He was cured. I don't know. Maybe they put him on like an antidepressant. So what else happened during this time? Let me really think about it. Okay, so maybe this isn't that interesting of a story, but it's very integral to what happens later in the story. So there was a dealer named Paul who lived in this building because this building that we lived in was filled with drug dealers. This guy, Paul and Cody, lived in the apartment. Paul was the distributor, and this kid, Cody, was kind of like his middleman. And we knew that he had weed, and Wayne was into smoking weed. Taylor liked smoking weed, and I like smoking weed. So one night, we couldn't find any weed. And me, Wayne, and Taylor were just sitting in my big room with my heater. And Wayne said, let's just go knock on Paul's door and we'll ask for the weed. And we said, okay, who's going to go? And Wayne said, I'll go. Taylor, do you want to go with me? Now, mind you, Wayne is super good looking. So I'm like, whatever, Taylor can go. So Wayne and Taylor leave the apartment through the second exit. The apartment was so crappy that we had this door that you had to like break open and break through to get out. And they crawled through and they got the weed. And then Taylor came back into the room and she said, Brandon, I have to tell you something. I said, what? She said, so me and Wayne were waiting at the door to get weed from Paul. And I was standing in his way. And he grabbed my hips and moved me over. And I was like, you motherfucker. And I was like, I mean, think about it. You're touching my girlfriend's hips. And I was really mad. So I texted Wayne. He lived 2 rooms down. I was like, Wayne, you grabbed my girlfriend's hips. Blah, 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 blah. And Wayne came and banged on my door. And I opened it and he said, what? And Taylor was there like, oh God. And I said, you grabbed Taylor's hips, dude, just admit it. And he was like, no, I didn't. And of course he did. But like, we almost fought over that. And that night, I think Taylor went to do something else. So it was just me and Wayne in the apartment, and Mike was still in the hospital. So me and Wayne got drunk together. Actually, no. Mike was out of the hospital, but he was still drinking a lot. So Mike was there. But Mike asked if he could drive my car down to the grocery store to buy groceries while he was drunk. And I was like, I had like a crappy Ford Escort station wagon, and the grocery store was literally like half a mile away. So I let him use my car. And Mike was into all this new age stuff, so he was constantly telling me, the only reason you'll get arrested is if you're paranoid. If you're paranoid of the cops, they'll pull you over. But if you're not, they won't. And I sort of half believed that to some degree. So I let him go. Me and Wayne continued drinking, having a good time. Meanwhile, we kind of made up over him grabbing Taylor's hips. But I was still really angry about it. Because I'm like, dude, you have everything and I have nothing. You have had so many beautiful girlfriends. Why don't you just let me have Taylor? And I always said this to the dudes that hit on Taylor on Facebook Messenger. Like this one kid who was a popular kid who banged every pretty girl in my school confessed to Taylor over Facebook that he was always in love with her. And I messaged him and I was like, his name was Trey. I said, Trey, you have everything. Like, you can get any beautiful girl you want. Like, can you just let me have the one good thing in my life? And I don't know if he responded, but one day I saw him downtown in traffic, and he didn't see me, but I saw him, and I just started mad dogging him, just staring at him. And he saw me, and it caught him off guard. I'm going on a detour, and he was like, and then he started mad dogging me. We just mad dogged each other. Anyways, where am I at in the story? Okay, so all of a sudden, and I can't believe I have a picture of this, me and Wayne look at each other and we're like, where is Mike? Like, he's been gone for 30 minutes. And we look out the window, and what do you see? My little crappy Ford Escort is pulled over by a Maryland state cop. So Mike got a DUI. And I think the cop called us. We were drunk. We were really drunk. And he told us to just drive. Because he got pulled over right in front of our apartment. So the cop just let me drive right back to the apartment. Mike goes to jail. And I'm like, screw him. He's an idiot. Why did he drink and drive? I know I let him use my car, but it's not my responsibility that he got caught. So me and Wayne drank until we passed out. And then a couple hours later, mind you, Taylor's gone. Mike's in jail. I hear a banging at my door. And I wake up and I'm like already feeling my hangover come on. And I'm like, what? And Wayne is outside my door, which has like a latch on it. And he's going, Brandon, Mike's in jail, man. We gotta go bail him out. And I said, no, dude, no. Like, we're drunk. We were still drunk. I'm like, we're drunk. We can't. I'm not gonna get a DUI. And I was always safe about getting DUIs, even though I got a couple years later. And Wayne just wouldn't stop banging at my door. And I just kept going, go away, go to sleep. We'll get him tomorrow. And he was like, Brandon, unlock the door, man. We gotta go save Mike. Like, he thought it was like an adventure we were gonna have, drinking and driving to go save my idiot friend from county jail. And eventually, I'm thinking, well, my door's locked. He's not going to get in here. And then all of a sudden, I hear... And Wayne kicked my door open and busted the lock off. And all of a sudden, Wayne's in my room, drunk. And he said that I was so mad that he could see smoke coming out of my ears. But he said I was so mad that I literally started stomping on the floor like a child, going, and the worst thing you can do if somebody's drunk and screaming at you is to be like, all right, dude, okay, go back to sleep. But Wayne just kept acting like an idiot. So I picked up, I had a picture of my dad. It was like his high school senior picture. I don't know why I had it. It was in a glass frame. I guess I just wanted a picture of my family. I picked up this picture of my dad and I ran up to Wayne and I just smashed him over the face with it. Now, mind you, I said this in a video recently. A lot of this story is just strung with violence. I don't know why I was such a violent person, but I smashed Wayne over the face. And I don't remember what happened after that. I think he just stumbled back to his room and went to sleep. And the next morning, I wake up and there's glass all over the floor. And I immediately remembered what I did. But I had to pretend I was too drunk to remember. So I went down, and Wayne is like making breakfast, scraping his little toast, his butter on the toast. And I'm pretending Wayne, what happened last night? There's glass all over my floor. And thankfully, he didn't have any scars or cuts. I was so... I didn't understand that glass smashing over someone's face. I didn't get... How does that cut you? Because it breaks, but how does it cut you? Thankfully, I didn't maim Wayne or scar him. By the way, I can back up every single one of these stories. And maybe I'll call Wayne in the future. So I pretended I didn't know, and me and Wayne were very close friends, so he forgave me immediately. I think we had to bail Mike, or no, Mike, I think he got his mom to bail him out, because we didn't have any money, and it probably cost $300 to bail him out. Well, I was going to give you an update. Mike is doing very well. He's got like a wife and kids these days. He's doing a lot better. I don't even think he does drugs anymore. So now that I've mentioned that I was drinking all day during this time, it begs the question, was I an alcoholic or am I an alcoholic? And to answer that as honestly as possible, I have to say yes, but mainly no. Because my whole life, I have treated alcohol as like a social lubricant. I have binge drink. I used to do this thing where I'd buy a half gallon of vodka and I would lay in bed and drink and watch Mad Men. I'd watch like the whole season. Also, a bad habit I had, and maybe still have, is I would drink until I was blacked out and then I'd wake up and continue drinking. I don't know anybody else who does that. But honestly, these days, I barely drink and I don't like it because there are too many negative side effects. One, it's very hard to conceal. Like, I don't like taking stuff that you can't take at work. Like, it smells on your breath. People can visibly see you're slurring. Two, you get really bad hangovers. Three, you feel good for like 30 minutes, and that's all. So I do not think I'm an alcoholic, but there have been times where I've gotten sober for short periods, and I notice I start going to the liquor store more often. But mainly, I don't like alcohol, and mainly, I've been a drug addict. But during this time, I'm drinking all day. My older brother, one thing that we bonded over was reading, and I love reading. I don't read anymore, but I've probably read about 100 books in my life. I love books. If I read these days, it's usually nonfiction. So my brother said, "Hey, I got this book. It's really good. I can't stop reading it. It's called On the Road by Jack Kerouac." And he gave me his copy. He said it's about beatniks. I didn't know what a beatnik was. But I didn't realize the beatniks were a counterculture that eventually turned into the hippies. Like, for example, if you've ever seen, well, no, never mind. Um, a beatnik is like Lenny Bruce was a beatnik. George Carlin may have been a little bit of a beatnik. They were sort of the prelude to hipsters. Anyway, that's not interesting. On the Road is about a hobo character that would ride the rails and drink whiskey all day. And while I was reading this book, I loved it. I was like, I want to become a hobo. I want to live on the rails. And I started drinking whiskey because of the book. Now, a big theme of this story, I know people say that movies and books and culture doesn't influence. It totally did for me. Like, if I read Junkie by William Burroughs way before I did H. And that book kind of made me want to do it. Trainspotting kind of made me want to do it. Jack Kerouac's On the Road made me drink whiskey all day. So I was reading on the road, drinking whiskey, and me and Taylor, Mike's girlfriend Alex, the black girl, Wayne, and whoever was around would go down to the river and we would drink all day. So one night, I'm drinking whiskey, and we decide let's walk back to the apartment. And as we're walking back, Taylor goes, "Hey, we need to get groceries. We're out of groceries." So we all looked at each other and said, "Well, let's walk to the grocery store." It was probably like a 15-minute walk to the town's grocery store. So mind you, I'm blitzed out of my mind drunk. And it's winter still. It's like really cold weather. I'm talking below zero. So we walk into this grocery store, and I had this big hoodie on. And this grocery store, this lady I worked with named Lisa, also worked at the nursing home with me. So I'm walking around this grocery store with my friends and with Taylor, and I'm just grabbing Lunchables and like loaves of bread and shoving it into my hoodie. So I'm walking around just stealing everything, being very obvious about it, to the point where I literally think like a security guard was behind me watching me steal. And everybody's like, "Oh man, Brandon's crazy." And this kid, Scott, was with us, and he stole a little bit too. And here's the thing. Were my intentions to steal all this stuff? No. I think I was just trying to be crazy because I was drunk. Anyway, we get to the point where we have to check out, and Taylor looks at me and she's like, "Oh, you idiot." She's like, "Dude, I'm trying to actually buy groceries so we can survive, and you're stealing like 8 Lunchables and loaves of bread?" And I start walking to the door, and all of a sudden behind me I hear, "Hey!" And I immediately start running. And the guy almost caught me. But this kid, Scott, ran up to the security guy, and he grabbed him, and he pulled a Slim Jim out of his pocket. And he said, "I stole the Slim Jim. Here, take it, take it." I took it. And the guy was like, "No, no, no, get that kid." And I'm running, and people are chasing me. And as I'm running, all the Lunchables and all the crap I stole was falling onto the floor as I'm running behind this building. And I think the owner or security or whatever he was, I think he realized this idiot drunk kid just dropped everything, so I'm not going to pursue chasing him. Plus, it was freezing cold that night. But he did call the police, and we'll get to that in a second. So I'm running, and there's snow on the ground, and I'm in my head, I think there are freaking dogs chasing me and cops and security guards. And I remember as I'm running, the ground beneath my feet suddenly disappeared. And all of a sudden, I'm trudging through water in below freezing temperature. And all of a sudden, I'm in a lake. And I just remember as I'm trudging through the lake, there was literal ice on top of the water. Like, it was cutting at my throat. And I'm like, ugh. And I eventually swam through this freezing cold lake. And I got out and I continued running with wet clothes. And I remember I was so cold that my body started to freeze up. And I eventually, because I'm like a mile from the apartment, eventually I started to feel warm, which means you're about to die of hypothermia. And I get back into the apartment and Taylor's there, everybody's there, everybody's laughing. They're like, oh my God. But they were like, the cops knocked at the door. They know it's you. And I'm like, oh. And I was like, oh. And I remember I had to throw blankets and clothes into the dryer. And Taylor wrapped me in a blanket because I almost died of hypothermia that night. And for some reason, the cops never came back. They never pursued it. I guess the owner was like, the kid didn't steal. I think he was just drunk. I don't want to press charges. But this is kind of another detour. A couple days later, I'm at the nursing home I'm working at. And I told you that one of the ladies I worked with, Lisa, this big round lady, she looked like Jabba the Hutt. She walked up to me and said, hey, Brandon. And I said, hey. I liked her. We were close. We were like friends, coworkers. She went, I was at work the other day and I looked at my boss, the owner was looking at the security cameras and guess who I saw stealing? And I was like, oh. And she just kept going, I'm disappointed. She was smiling. I'm just disappointed, Brandon. I thought you were a good kid. And I'm like, one, I'm not a good kid. Most of my personality is a fraud. Well, no, maybe. But in light, like during this time when I was doing all these drugs, I still maintained a professional, like, what's the word? Facade. And everybody thought I was a sweet kid. But meanwhile, I was getting into drugs. But during this time, the owner, or one of my managers, Mary, another big lady. I liked her. She was a sweet lady, one of my favorite bosses ever. Except one time, she pinched my ass. And I remember I felt like sexually assaulted. I was like, yeah, I'm 17 and you just pinched my ass in front of everybody. I needed like a shower. But one time, she had to pick me up because she lived in the town, like, right up the road from our apartment. And I remember I got into work, and she said, Brandon, you look really thin. You have lost, like, 20 pounds in, like, a week. What's going on? And I didn't have an explanation. I was like, I don't know. I think it was because I was taking a lot of Adderall and Vyvanse, and I was drinking a lot and not eating because I was poor. I was in my Jack Kerouac on the road phase. So I don't know how long this video is. I'm sure it's getting to the point where it's long. And like I said, it's going to be a 20-part series. Please like and subscribe. Seriously, if you like this channel, I have so many other stories I want to tell. So I'm going to go ahead and bleed into the next part. And then I'm going to end it on a cliffhanger. So, mind you, I think it's like, it's starting to be March, April, like spring is kind of coming out. Mind you, I spent the whole winter drinking, partying, and having unprotected sex with whatever girl I could. Some girls I don't even remember. Like, I don't remember. And I didn't like wearing condoms because I remember I'd put it on and I'd be like, ugh. It was almost like putting it into like like a sandwich bag with the crumbs still in it, and being like, all right, I'm gonna bang ya. So I never wore them, and I didn't care. I don't think I got anybody pregnant. And I seriously thought at this age, I was 18, maybe kind of creeping up on 19. I don't think I thought I was going to live that long. I don't know why. I just didn't care about the future. And like they say, your prefrontal cortex does not develop until you're like 26. That's why 17-year-olds are constantly getting into fatal accidents, because the part of your brain that recognizes consequences doesn't form until your mid-20s. So I had a lot of reckless, unprotected sex. Well, one night, Taylor, or actually no, not Taylor, some girl at my work, I was telling her, I said, I saw this movie called Gummo. I had never seen a Harmony Korine movie. He's one of my favorite directors. And she said, oh, Harmony Korine, I have a movie. It's called Kids, which, by the way, I think I have the Kids logo right there. It's one of my favorite movies. And then she brought it into work. This nurse gave me a copy, and I went home, and Taylor said, oh, I love this movie. Let's watch it. So we put it on my little crappy DVD player, because I don't even think we had TV. I don't think we could even afford TV. And we start watching it. And if you've ever seen the movie Kids, the opening scene is like gritty and disgusting. It's basically this New York teenagers. This kid named Telly is banging this girl who looks like she's like 12. And they're sweating. And it's like, ooh, this feels really kind of gross and gritty. And I liked the movie. Like, I liked it. But if you've seen the movie, there eventually comes a scene where these two girls, Schlo Sevigny and Rosario Dawson, who, by the way, Rosario Dawson, Harmony Korine or Larry Clark just found her sitting on a New York City stoop and just cast her in the movie. And now she's a famous actress. So that's a cool little tidbit. They go to get an HIV test because it's mid-90s New York and HIV and AIDS was really prevalent. And there's a scene where they get tested. And I remember me and Taylor are sitting on my bed watching this movie. And I start thinking, I'm like, well, yeah, I've had a lot of unprotected sex this year. And eventually, in the movie, the girl that has banged like 15 dudes tests negative. And then Schlo Sevigny, who banged one dude, tests positive.
Jenny, you've tested positive for the HIV virus.
What?
The test isn't 100% accurate. You should...
I tested positive?
And as soon as that scene happened, I got really nervous. And I looked at Taylor. She looked at me. And I said, let's turn this off. And she was like, what? No! She's like, it's just getting good. And I went, no, let's turn this off. I don't want to see this. And I turned it off. I've had this habit my whole life where I pace a lot. I start pacing back and forth. She's like, what's wrong? Taylor said that. And I said, what if I have AIDS? And she was like, well, maybe you do. You banged all these girls. She's still in her jealous phase. And I've mentioned in a few videos that I think I may have bipolar mania or borderline schizophrenia. If you watch my channel that's in my description called The Digital Dystopia, it's obvious that I'm a very paranoid person to the point where it borderlines on schizophrenia. So I've had mental breaks, and I'll tell a lot of stories of mental breakdowns I've had. But this was the first time I had an absolute mental breakdown because the movie Kids scared me so bad that I convinced myself, I did all these mental gymnastics. I said, I definitely have AIDS. I have AIDS. I have AIDS. Not AIDS. What am I going to do with my AIDS? And Taylor was like, shut the hell up. Quit worrying. You don't have AIDS. But in my head, I was like, I have AIDS. Like, I wasn't thinking logically, but the whole summer, I was always thinking I was going to die of AIDS. And I thought I gave it to Taylor, and I was really freaked out. It actually got so bad that I stopped talking about it. And I started reading. I read this book called And the Band Played On, and I started reading all these books on AIDS. I got really obsessed with AIDS. And I remember I would drive my car listening to sad music. I was really into the album Can't Maintain by Andrew Jackson Jihad, which is a really emotional album. And I would just drive, and there'd be a single tear in my eye, because I thought, how am I going to tell my mom I have AIDS? And I wouldn't get tested, but I just thought I had it. So if you're watching this and you have teenagers, if you want to scare them from not wearing condoms, show them the movie Kids, because that movie freaked me out. It has freaked a lot of people out. And it got to the point where I was like cooking eggs, and I'd be like thinking about, oh man, I was like, when is my HIV going to turn into AIDS? And I'm watching YouTube videos on it, and it was not just minor paranoia. It turned into a mental obsession, and I really started going crazy. And at the time, I was young, vulnerable, and I just wanted something to make me feel better and to stop worrying about my freaking AIDS that I thought I had. By the way, I don't have AIDS. I don't have any STDs. I don't even have Hep C, because I never shared needles. I actually shared needles with like 2 people, but I would go to houses and people would be sharing needles, and I'm like, you idiots, and they all have Hep C. So don't have AIDS, don't have any blood diseases, I hope. And one night, and mind you, I'm not telling anybody about my paranoia of AIDS anymore, so Taylor doesn't know it. Taylor came home, and I'm sitting in my room. And mind you, this apartment we live in is filled with drug dealers. I've already talked about Paul and Cody, who lived right next door. And Taylor said, hey, I ran into this guy named Cody. And I said, oh, Cody, he sells weed, right? He said, yeah, but he's not selling weed. She said, do you have $80? I said, what? What for? And she said, he's got this pill. And I'm like, are you serious? $80 for a pill? She said, yeah. I said, what's it called? And she said, it's called Oxycontin. And little did I know that night would forever change not only my brain chemistry, but it would take me down a dark path that I still have not managed to crawl out of. I'm going to leave it there. I told you I'd leave it on a cliffhanger. I know a lot of you guys know about Oxycontin. So this is part 4. I'm going to make a part 5. I took about 2-week break, and actually I filmed this video a couple times, and I think this is the best version. So if you like this video, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, share it. This whole sobriety series, I want to help people. So if you like my channel, do your best to help. I'm eventually going to upload at least 3 times a week. But I have a planner on my wall of all these stories I'm going to tell. And I'm going balls to the wall on this YouTube thing. So please like, comment, subscribe. Please patiently anticipate part 5 of How I Became an Addict, the Never-Ending Story. And let me tell you once more, if you think this story has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
Go on and slip into Xanax bars. I'm ready to get full, bit the crown to wash it down.